Hey everyone, my name is David. Welcome to Church Visit number 23 of 52 Churches in 52 Weeks, round 3. If you're new to the channel, this is a one-year spiritual adventure as we understand and explore a wide variety of churches. As I record this, it's October 2024. We are just a couple weeks away from casting votes for this year's U.S. presidential election. And obviously there's a number of hot button topics on the table, but with this channel we explore churches. And I thought it might be interesting to take a look into the church life of some of the candidates, no matter Democrat or Republican, in an unbiased way as best as I possibly can. In our last video, we drove out to the Twin Cities to attend the Lutheran Church of Tim Walz, the current governor of Minnesota and also the VP pick on the Democratic ticket with Kamala Harris. This past weekend, I just got back from New York City. People go to New York City for all kinds of reasons. For some, it may be the allure of making their fortunes in a place where their dreams soar as high as the skyscrapers. For others, it may just be to experience the city's energy, where it seems like every street alley just hums with life. For others, it just may be tourist attractions. Maybe you want to see the Statue of Liberty, Times Square, see a Broadway musical, catch a Yankees game, or maybe even see the New York skyline from the One World Trade Center. But for me, the reason I go to New York City is to visit the churches that Donald Trump attended when he lived there not too long ago. This past weekend, I made a trip with some new friends to First Presbyterian Church in Jamaica, New York. This is a neighborhood in Queens. And it was here that Donald Trump attended church and I was told was baptized and confirmed as a young boy. To my surprise, I was not expecting this type of worship service. This church, the congregation, the pastor, they welcomed me and my friends with open arms, and I can't say enough good things about this church. So even with the past association with Donald Trump, this church has a unique history in itself that I will touch more in this video. But first, I'm going to show about 5 minutes of some of the gospel songs inside so you can kind of get a vibe of what a church service is like here. And then from there, I'll kind of share a little bit more about Donald Trump's childhood church life, as well as the history in this church with First Presbyterian Church. So stick around, I'll be back in just a moment.
So when I kneel down
I think most people could probably agree. When you think of the church that Donald Trump was born into, you probably were not thinking this. Because when I think of Trump, I'm thinking everything needs to be dialed up to an 11. So for his childhood church, I'm thinking gold-plated pews. I'm thinking maybe silver spoons for communion. Maybe you have a choir wearing a bunch of red hats that say, "Make church great again." I'm thinking rich. I'm thinking bold. I'm thinking big. And with First Presbyterian Church in Jamaica, that was not that at all. And it is far removed from what Donald Trump may have experienced when he attended 65 years ago. And I think that shows a shift in America, and that was so much on display here. One thing that I found is maybe it wasn't rich in finances, but I found First Presbyterian Church in Jamaica to be rich in history and also rich in character. This was home for people. And it's kind of funny because the day before I attended, I thought it might be a good idea just to scout it out. It wasn't on my game plan to attend service here. I actually was planning to visit Marble Collegiate Church that Trump attended for about 50 years or so, that he previously said that he was a member. And Marble Collegiate Church kind of, when he started to run for president, they kind of distanced themselves from him. So this one was kind of on, the back burner for me because it just looked like a hole in the wall type of church. I didn't really think there was going to be any story here. And instead, what I found was just good people, good conversation. And after talking with so many people here, with politics and the past association with Trump, I was trying to tiptoe around that because with politics, that can be very sensitive for people. And when I'm visiting these churches, I want to understand the story. And one thing that I took away from this is just how much focus that First Presbyterian Church has on community and on service. You may not think it, but in its heyday, this was one of the top Presbyterian churches in the U.S. Not only that, but it is the oldest continuously serving Presbyterian congregation in the U.S. currently, having served for 350 plus years. So the congregation was formed in 1662 by English immigrants. And I guess they made their first church building in 1699, and they teamed up with two other congregations, a First Reformed Church and an Episcopal Church. So these three congregations met in the same stone church that they built together. And I guess this congregation conglomerate, I guess, so to speak, were there for 40 plus years until finally the congregations decided to kind of make their own churches. So with First Presbyterian Church, they've had 5 separate buildings, and the one that they have right now was built in 1813. Eventually, and again, this land, it was just like farmlands. It's not like New York with all the buildings and development that you see today. But in 1920, they decided that they had to move the church. So here's what they did. They put the church and they got it underneath a bunch of logs, and they moved it to its current location being pulled by a mule. So just to think about that, just 100 years ago is kind of wild. So the church building, 1920, gets moved. And then since that time, the membership really increased around that time thanks to Reverend Andrew McGill. So right next door, they built his memorial building that helps with different type of community services. So with Reverend McGill, I guess he was able to kind of help the congregation grow through 2 world wars and also the financial market collapse with the Great Depression. So after Reverend McGill moved on, suddenly, especially after World War II, you had a big spike in housing development in this area, and eventually the church membership actually started to decline. It was around this time that the Trump family started to attend First Presbyterian Church in Jamaica. His mother was a Scottish immigrant, and Donald Trump was born in 1946. After service, I got talking with the pastor, and he mentioned that Donald Trump actually was baptized in this baptismal font. So the Trump family would often sit in the balcony, and then I don't know about his church attendance, but he often would attend Sunday school lessons. And in 1955 is when he received his childhood Bible. Apparently, this had a big impact on him, and he kept it. So when Trump was sworn into office as the 45th president of the United States, he actually laid his hands to be sworn in with his childhood Bible that he received here. Also, I guess Donald Trump's social media team about a decade ago posted on his Instagram with a Throwback Thursday photo when they still were doing Throwback Thursdays. And there's a picture of him with his confirmation class from June 1959. So he would have just been turning 13 at that point. In the 1960s, due to the popularity of Reverend Norman Vincent Peale, the Trump family eventually switched to Marble Collegiate Church, which is another historic church in its own right. I also visited that, so expect to see a video in the future for that. The pastor also mentioned afterwards that after World War II ended, and also as I researched it, after the Trump family left, the island opened up to a lot of new development. So there were some big shifts in housing. So now First Presbyterian Church in Jamaica has kind of transitioned where now it's represented by 30 different nations of immigrants. So it's just this rich mix of cultures and nationalities now. To give a brief recap for what church service was like here, we arrived for their 8 a.m. service. I guess a busier service is at 10 a.m. For our schedule, 8 a.m. just worked better. And one thing about Queens is parking is an absolute nightmare. So we're trying to find a parking spot. And fortunately, as we were close to the church, the parking attendant or security guard, I think he kind of doubles as both. We let him know like where it was a good spot to park. He asked if we were visiting for the first time and we said yes. And fortunately, like they did have one spot for first-time visitors that he allowed us to park in. I've seen this with other type of churches, especially mega churches. It's not typically a big deal because there's just so much parking available. But here in Queens, this was ideal. So this was a huge help. So we got into the church just as it was starting. 2 greeters meted us at the door, learned our names, we learned their names, and we took a seat near the back. And the pastor opened up, he kind of mentioned the importance of voting. He didn't favor or say any of the political candidates, just the importance of voting. From there, we did all the worship music. And I wanted to kind of, like typically I don't play my worship montage part of the video very long, but for this one, I wanted you to get a sense of what it was like inside. Because with these gospel songs, they just build up. And like there's this one where we're singing the Fill Me Up, and the woman in pink, you know, she's just kind of dancing by herself, standing up. And over time, as the gospel song just keeps building up with the gospel choir, you know, building up as well with the music, it just taps into your soul differently. And eventually everyone starts standing up, and it just taps the spirit just in such a different way that I really can't express in words quite the way that I want to. Eventually, the pastor gave this sermon, and it was strange because the previous video I did with Tim Walz's ELCA Lutheran Church, the sermon focused on the first shall be last and the last shall be first. He touched on that as well here, and he brought up, and I think it was his sons. Don't quote me on that, but it was about a pancake fight. And the brothers were trying to figure out who was going to get the first pancake. And as they're wrestling and debating, the mother asks, you know, what would Jesus do, basically? And the younger brother basically says, you know, why not you be Jesus, to his older brother? And he kind of relayed this into a story with James and John and their interactions with Jesus. And he kind of discussed a little bit about the election, where you have those running for president, where you're going to have this, like if you become president, like everyone, like you're going to be recognized, you're going to have some self-glorification, you're going to have the access to all the power and all the military and all the information. But the point with Jesus and this story is that's not the destination. That's not the journey to take. And for James and John, if they're going to follow him, it's not going to be for themselves. it's going to be a path of suffering and of pain. For James and John, like maybe they didn't realize it at that point, but eventually it's almost like this prophetic message where you're going to go on this path, you're going to suffer, you're going to be in pain. And sure enough, James and John do pay the ultimate sacrifice for following Jesus. After the service, we talked with so many people, and just an amazing meet and greet. The heart of this church, the character, can't say enough good things. We also got to speak with the pastor. He's been serving there for 32 years. Kind of bounced a number of questions off of him. And he did mention with the baptismal font, that's where Donald Trump was baptized as a child. Again, we were trying to kind of tiptoe around the sensitivity with Donald Trump, just because he can be a divisive type of figure. And we mentioned, we had an interest in attending churches that have been attended by U.S. presidents. So the one question that I asked was, what's the best thing about this church? And, without even thinking, he said the community. He found himself to be a community pastor. He saw this as, like he mentioned, other friends of his became doctors or accountants or these other high-paying professions. But what he loves is the diversity of his job. And it's not just a church inside, but it's a church outside where they can serve the community. And with any kind of service, any kind of social programs, it's love and support. And that's what I got most from this church visit. As I was talking with members here, one thing that I found difficult for myself was to bring up Donald Trump, because especially in today's media landscape, there's a lot of, when you say his name, there's a lot of divisiveness. So I was trying to be very sensitive around that. And at the same point, many people will look at the church that Donald Trump attended as a child and they'll say, oh, they didn't do a very good job. And after attending this is not the same church that a young Donald Trump attended 65 years ago. This is vastly different with a completely different demographic makeup. So I was a little worried just how the church would react if I did bring up his name. And what I loved about this church is it wasn't focused on that past association, but what they could do for the community, how they could serve the community. And they took a lot of time to talk to me about just what they're doing with the Miguel Memorial Building and the Tree of Life Center. So apparently this church, with their programs, helped to house 174 people that are unhoused. Not only that, but then you also have school programs and things for kids after school, and just the multitude of resources. And as I was trying to research a little bit more, has Donald Trump ever attended this church since he visited as a kid in the 1950s? I couldn't find if he had visited and attended a service since, but then according to The Atlantic, there's a report that when the church was trying to raise funds, Donald Trump contributed a $10,000 check with a letter. So according to that, it seems like, talking with members, I didn't get a pro-Trump response or an anti-Trump response. It was always very respectful, and I really appreciate that about this church. So no matter your political leaning or what you make of things, especially in today's election coming up, I found that sense of Jesus at the forefront of this church. So if you take anything away from this video, Jesus was first. Before we put the kibosh on this video, I want to say thank you very much to Stuart Edge, who helped navigate me throughout New York City and also showed some interest in this church project. So I want to say thanks to him. I'm going to put his channel information in the description box below. Also, to those that helped give me a ride, especially just with the outrageous transportation costs in New York, I want to say thank you as well. For our next video, I need your help. There are a number of videos that I have planned in such a short amount of time. This past weekend, I flew out to San Francisco to attend Third Baptist Church. Apparently, this is the church of Kamala Harris. So I want to do that video before the election happens. Also, I have another video because Halloween is this week, where I attended Old Dutch Reformed Church in Sleepy Hollow, New York. This is the church that's featured in the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. So kind of figured maybe we'll do a Halloween church as well. And because I'm visiting all these presidential candidates, I wanted to visit the Catholic Church of JD Vance. I don't think I'm going to have time to make a video in time for the election for his church. So if you want to see that type of content or any requests for what video comes next, feel free to leave that in the comments below. With the political season, comments can get a little rude, so I want to make sure to as well say, I would love to see comments in a respectful way down below. That helps with the YouTube algorithm, with subscribes, likes, comments, shares, all that jazz. YouTube does their stuff, right? So whatever you can do to help out, would appreciate it very much. But until next time, hope you have a good one.